The crystalline spires of Zephyria Prime stretched toward twin suns, their surfaces reflecting the morning light across the capital city's floating platforms. Princess Lyrelei stood at the edge of the royal observation deck, her silver hair cascading down her back like liquid starlight. The ceremonial robes of her house bore the ancient symbols of the Zephyrian Empire, each thread woven with nanotechnology that shimmed with every movement. Today marked the beginning of the Convergence Festival, a celebration that occurred once every solar cycle when representatives from across the galaxy gathered to renew trade agreements and diplomatic relations. For Lyrelei, it held special significance beyond politics and commerce. Today, she would finally introduce Marcus Chen to her father, Emperor Valdris, the most powerful ruler in the known galaxy. Marcus emerged from the inner chambers, adjusting the formal attire that had been specially tailored for him. Unlike the flowing robes preferred by most galactic nobility, his outfit was a hybrid design that accommodated both human physiology and Zephyrian fashion sensibilities. The dark fabric was cut in clean lines that emphasized his broad shoulders and athletic build, while decorative elements borrowed from Zephyrian tradition added the necessary formality for court presentation. "You look nervous," Lyrelei observed, turning from the window to study her beloved's expression. Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that had become familiar to her over the months they had been together. Meeting the father of the woman you love is intimidating enough. Meeting an emperor who controls half the galaxy adds a few extra layers of pressure. She moved closer, placing her hands on his chest. Through the fabric, she could feel the steady rhythm of his heart, faster than usual, but still strong and determined. "My father is formidable, yes, but he is also fair. He judges beings by their character and actions, not their species or origin. Even when that species is known for being problematic." Lyrelei's expression softened. The reputation of humanity preceded them wherever they went in the galaxy. Stories of their wars, their tendency toward violence, their unpredictable nature had spread among the stars long before first contact was officially established. Most species viewed humans with a mixture of fear and fascination, seeing them as useful allies in conflict but dangerous to trust completely. "You are not the sum of your species' reputation," she said firmly. "You are Marcus Chen, the man who saved an entire refugee convoy from void pirates without thought for his own safety. The man who spent 3 months helping rebuild the agricultural systems on Kepler 7 after the solar flares destroyed their crops. The man who learned 17 different languages so he could communicate with the children at the interspecies orphanage on Luna Station." Marcus smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "When you put it like that, it sounds almost impressive." "It is impressive. And today, my father will see what I see in you." The sound of ceremonial chimes echoed across the platform, signaling the beginning of the day's proceedings. In the distance, ships of various designs were landing at the royal spaceport, bringing delegates from across the Empire. Lyrelei could identify vessels from the aquatic Nereid Collective, the insectoid hive minds of the Outer Rim, and the energy-based Luminari, who traveled in ships that looked more like captured stars than conventional spacecraft. "The delegation from Earth arrived this morning," Lyrelei mentioned as they began walking toward the throne chamber. "Admiral Harrison sends his regards and wishes to meet with you later." Marcus nodded. Admiral Sarah Harrison was one of the few high-ranking human military officers who had earned respect among the galactic community. Her tactical brilliance and diplomatic skills had been instrumental in establishing humanity's place among the stars, even as many questioned whether humans could be trusted with advanced technology and galactic citizenship. The corridors of the royal palace were works of art in themselves. The walls were constructed from a living crystal that grew in patterns reflecting the emotional state of the palace's inhabitants. Today, the formations showed excitement and anticipation, with flowing curves and spiral patterns that seemed to dance in the light. Guards stationed at regular intervals were members of the elite Stellar Guard, each one enhanced with cybernetic implants that made them formidable protectors of the royal family. As they approached the throne chamber, the massive doors began to open automatically. The room beyond was a marvel of architecture and technology, with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the galaxy, showing trade routes, diplomatic relationships, and the current positions of the Imperial fleet in three-dimensional holographic detail. Emperor Valdris sat upon the throne of stars, a structure that seemed to be carved from a single massive diamond, but was actually composed of crystallized space-time, a technology that existed at the very limits of galactic understanding. The Emperor himself was tall even by Zephyrian standards, his silver hair longer than his daughter's and marked with streaks of deep blue that indicated his advanced age and wisdom. His eyes, the same violet shade as Lyrale's, missed nothing as they surveyed the assembled delegates. The morning's proceedings began with the traditional presentations. Each delegation brought gifts and renewed their oaths of cooperation with the Empire. The Nereid Collective presented a pearl the size of a human head that contained the compressed essence of an entire ocean world. The hive minds offered a biotechnological enhancement that could allow faster-than-light communication across vast distances. The Luminari brought a device that could harvest energy directly from solar wind. Marcus watched with fascination as each group approached the throne with their own unique customs and protocols. The diversity of life in the galaxy never ceased to amaze him, from species that existed as pure energy to others who lived in the crushing depths of gas giants. Humanity was just one thread in an incredibly complex tapestry of civilizations. When the human delegation's turn came, Admiral Harrison stepped forward with military precision. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat, but her bearing commanded respect from every being in the chamber. Behind her walked a small group of human scientists, diplomats, and military officers. "Your Imperial Majesty," Admiral Harrison began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "On behalf of the United Earth Government and all human colonies, I present our continued pledge of cooperation and friendship." The gift from humanity was typically practical, yet innovative. A new class of medical nanobots that could adapt to the physiology of any known species, offering universal healing capabilities. It was the kind of advancement that showcased humanity's greatest strength, their ability to create solutions that worked for everyone, not just themselves. Emperor Valdris accepted the gift with the formal words required by protocol, but Marcus noticed the Emperor's eyes lingering on the human delegation longer than on others. There was something in that gaze that suggested deeper thoughts, perhaps concerns about humanity's rapid advancement and growing influence in galactic affairs. The formal presentations concluded, and the Emperor announced a recess before the afternoon's trade negotiations would begin. This was the moment Lyrale had been waiting for, the opportunity to make a more personal introduction. As the various delegates began to disperse for refreshments and informal conversations, Lyrale approached the throne with Marcus beside her. Several of the other nobles noticed this unusual breach of protocol. Typically, only official delegates approached the Emperor during formal sessions. "Father," Lyrale said, her voice respectful but warm, "I would like you to meet someone very important to me." Emperor Valdris studied Marcus with those penetrating violet eyes. The silence stretched for several heartbeats, and Marcus could feel the attention of every remaining person in the chamber focusing on this moment. The Emperor's expression was unreadable, giving no hint of his thoughts or judgments. "Approach," the Emperor commanded, his voice resonating with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware that his next words and actions would determine not only his own fate, but potentially the future of human-Zephyrian relations. He had rehearsed various greetings and protocols, but standing before one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, all preparation seemed inadequate. "Your Imperial Majesty," Marcus began, offering the formal bow he had practiced. "I am honored by this audience." The Emperor leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving Marcus's face. When he spoke, his words carried across the chamber with crystal clarity, ensuring that everyone present would hear and remember this moment. "And who exactly are you, human?" Before Marcus could respond, Emperor Valdris turned toward his daughter, his expression shifting from formal authority to something more complex, a mixture of curiosity, concern, and perhaps a hint of challenge. "Lyrelay," the Emperor said, his voice now carrying a different weight, the tone of a father rather than a ruler. "Who is this male?" The question hung in the air like a suspended blade. Everyone in the chamber understood that this was more than a simple inquiry about identity. The Emperor was asking about relationship, about intentions, about the significance of this introduction. The way he phrased it, "this male," rather than "this human," or "this delegate," suggested he already suspected the answer. Lyrelay lifted her chin, meeting her father's gaze with the same unwavering determination that had made her one of the most respected figures in the imperial court. When she spoke, her voice carried across the chamber with perfect clarity, ensuring that every delegate, every noble, every guard would witness this moment. "Father," she said, her words deliberate and proud, "this is Marcus Chen, and he is my husband." The silence that followed was absolute. In the vast chamber, designed to accommodate thousands, the only sound was the distant hum of the palace's environmental systems. Every conversation stopped. Every movement ceased. The revelation hung in the air like a shockwave, rippling outward to touch every person present. Emperor Valdris did not speak immediately. His violet eyes moved between his daughter and Marcus, processing implications that went far beyond personal relationships. A marriage between the heir to the Zephyrian throne and a human represented a fundamental shift in galactic politics. It was a statement about the future, about humanity's place among the stars, about the evolution of the empire itself. Marcus felt the weight of history pressing down on him. In the space of a few words, everything had changed. He was no longer just a human attending a diplomatic function. He was the husband of the imperial heir, a figure who would be scrutinized, analyzed, and judged by every power in the galaxy. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice carefully controlled but carrying undertones that only those who knew him well could interpret. "Husband," he repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. "And when did this union take place?" 3 months ago, Lyrelay answered without hesitation. "On Sanctuary Station, in a ceremony presided over by Ambassador Thorn of the Galactic Council." Marcus admired her courage in revealing not just the fact of their marriage, but the deliberate choice to make it official through galactic, rather than imperial law. It was a statement of independence, a declaration that she had acted as a citizen of the galaxy rather than merely as a Zephyrian princess. Emperor Valdris stood slowly, rising from the throne of stars with fluid grace despite his imposing height. As he descended the steps toward them, Marcus noticed that every guard in the chamber had subtly shifted position, not threatening but alert, ready to respond to whatever their emperor might command. 3 months, the Emperor mused, stopping directly in front of Marcus. At this close distance, the full weight of the Emperor's presence was overwhelming. This was a being who commanded fleets, who shaped the destiny of worlds, who held the power of life and death over billions of sentient creatures. 3 months, the Emperor repeated, and you chose not to inform me immediately? The question was directed at Lyrelay. But Marcus stepped forward, drawing the Emperor's attention back to himself. If there were consequences to face, he would not hide behind his wife's royal status. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "The choice to delay was mine. I asked Lorelei to allow me time to prove myself worthy of her, and of the trust you have placed in her as your heir." Emperor Valdris studied him for a long moment, those violet eyes seeming to penetrate directly to his soul. When the Emperor spoke again, his tone had shifted subtly, carrying a note of something that might have been approval. "Prove yourself worthy," the Emperor repeated. "An interesting perspective from a species that many consider barely civilized enough for galactic society." The words were harsh, but Marcus detected no malice in them. This was a test, an opportunity to demonstrate his character under pressure. Around the chamber, he could sense the tension as delegates and nobles waited to see how he would respond to such a direct challenge. "Your Majesty is correct that humanity has much to prove," Marcus replied carefully. "We are a young species in galactic terms, and we have made mistakes. But we are also capable of growth, of learning, of becoming more than what we were. And what makes you believe that you, personally, represent the best of what humanity can become?" It was a fair question, and Marcus knew that his answer would be remembered and discussed in royal courts and diplomatic circles across the galaxy. He thought of Lorelei's earlier words, of the actions that had brought him to this moment, of the choices that had shaped his life. "I don't claim to be the best of humanity, Your Majesty, but I do claim to be someone who believes in the potential for all species to work together, to build something greater than any of us could achieve alone. I believe in the future that Princess Lorelei envisions, a galaxy where cooperation replaces conflict, where diversity becomes strength." The Emperor nodded slowly, as if Marcus had confirmed something he had already suspected. When he turned back to his daughter, his expression had softened almost imperceptibly. "And you, Lorelei? Do you believe your husband can help build this future you both speak of?" "I do, Father. More than that, I believe he already has begun to do so." Emperor Valdris looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of the assembled delegates. Representatives of dozens of species watched this unprecedented moment, knowing they were witnessing something that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. When the Emperor spoke again, his voice carried the weight of official pronouncement, the tone he used when making declarations that would become imperial law. "Marcus Chen of Earth," he said formally, "you have married my daughter and heir without seeking permission, without following protocol, without regard for centuries of imperial tradition." Marcus felt his heart racing, but he maintained his composure. Whatever consequences were about to be announced, he would face them with dignity. "However," the Emperor continued, and that single word changed everything, "you have also demonstrated the courage to stand before me and accept responsibility for your choices. You speak of cooperation and unity, ideals that this empire was founded upon." The Emperor paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle across the chamber. "I hereby recognize your marriage to my daughter as legitimate under imperial law. You are welcomed into the royal house of Zephyria as Prince Consort, with all the rights and responsibilities that title entails." The announcement sent a wave of shock through the assembled delegates. In the space of minutes, a human had gone from unknown individual to imperial family member. The political implications were staggering, representing a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just occurred. He looked at Lorelei and saw tears of joy in her violet eyes, relief and happiness radiating from her expression. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Marcus managed, his voice thick with emotion. "I swear to you that I will prove worthy of this honor and of your daughter's love." Emperor Valdris smiled for the first time since the proceedings began, a genuine expression of warmth that transformed his austere features. "See that you do, my son. The galaxy will be watching." As the Emperor returned to his throne and the formal session resumed, Marcus realized that his life had just changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. He was no longer just Marcus Chen, human diplomat and explorer. He was Prince Consort of the Zephyrian Empire, husband to the future Empress, and a symbol of humanity's growing role in galactic civilization. The afternoon's trade negotiations proceeded with an undercurrent of excitement and speculation. Every delegate in the chamber understood that they had witnessed a historic moment, one that would be discussed and analyzed for generations to come. The marriage of a human to imperial royalty represented more than a personal union. It was a statement about the future direction of the galaxy's most powerful empire. As the day's proceedings concluded and the delegates began to disperse, Marcus found himself the center of attention in ways he had never experienced. Representatives from dozens of species approached him with congratulations, requests for private meetings, and thinly veiled attempts to assess this new player in galactic politics. Admiral Heiress was among the first to reach him, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. "Congratulations, Marcus. Though I suspect you have just made your life exponentially more complicated." "That's an understatement," Marcus replied with a wry smile. "Any advice for navigating imperial politics as a human?" "Trust your instincts," Admiral Heiress said seriously. "They got you this far. And remember that you're not just representing yourself anymore. Every action you take will be seen as reflecting on all of humanity." As the evening approached, and the formal ceremonies gave way to more relaxed social gatherings, Marcus and Lirelai found a moment of relative privacy on one of the palace's observation terraces. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reflected off the crystal spires of the capital city. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Lirelai asked, slipping her hand into his. Marcus considered the question seriously. His life had just been transformed in ways he was still processing. He would need to learn Imperial protocol, navigate the complex relationships between dozens of alien species, and somehow prove that humanity deserved its place among the galactic elite. "I'm not sure anyone could be ready for this," he admitted, "but I'm willing to try. For you, for humanity, for the future we both want to build." Lirelai smiled, the expression lighting up her face like starlight. "That's all I needed to hear." As they stood together watching the sunset over the capital of the galaxy's greatest empire, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From a small research station on the edge of human space to the throne room of the Zephyrian Empire, it seemed impossible that so much could change so quickly. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to prove that humanity could be trusted with a place among the stars. The marriage announcement had been accepted, but the real test of his worthiness would come in the months and years ahead. The galaxy was watching, just as Emperor Valdris had said, and Marcus was determined not to disappoint them. 6 months had passed since the revelation in the throne chamber, and Marcus Chen had learned that being Prince Consort of the Zephyrian Empire was far more complex than any diplomatic training could have prepared him for. The crystalline palace that had once seemed like a marvel of architecture now felt like an intricate maze of political maneuvering, ancient protocols, and subtle power struggles that could determine the fate of entire star systems. The morning began like many others in recent weeks, with Marcus reviewing intelligence reports in his private study. The room had been designed to accommodate human preferences while maintaining Zephyrian aesthetic principles, resulting in a space that felt both familiar and alien. Earth-style furniture sat alongside flowing crystal formations that served as both decoration and information displays, showing real-time data from across the Empire. Today's reports were more troubling than usual. 3 separate incidents had occurred in the past week that seemed designed to test the stability of human-imperial relations. On Kepler Prime, a human trading vessel had been impounded by local authorities on questionable charges of smuggling. In the Vegan system, a group of anti-human protesters had disrupted a diplomatic conference, demanding the expulsion of all human representatives from galactic government. Most concerning of all, intelligence suggested that several noble houses within the Empire were quietly questioning Emperor Valdris's decision to accept a human into the royal family. Marcus set aside the reports as Lyrelai entered the study, her expression indicating she carried news of her own. Over the months of their marriage, he had learned to read the subtle signs of her moods and concerns. Today she looked troubled, but determined. "The Council of Houses has called for an extraordinary session," she announced without preamble. "They're invoking the ancient right of questioning, demanding a formal evaluation of your fitness to hold royal titles." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The Council of Houses represented the oldest and most powerful families in the Zephyrian Empire, nobles whose lineages stretched back thousands of years. Their support was crucial for the stability of imperial rule, and their opposition could create serious problems for Emperor Valdris. "How serious is this?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Very serious. Lord Thaxion of House Viridian is leading the challenge, with support from at least 6 other major houses. They're not questioning our marriage directly, but they are demanding proof that you possess the qualities necessary to serve the Empire in times of crisis." Marcus stood and moved to the window, looking out over the capital city. In the distance, he could see ships coming and going from the spaceport, representatives of the vast network of worlds that comprise the Empire. Somewhere among those worlds, problems were brewing that would test not just his abilities but the very foundations of galactic stability. "What kind of proof do they want?" "That's the challenge," Lyrelai replied, moving to stand beside him. "The Council has chosen to invoke the trial of 3 spheres, an ancient test that hasn't been used in over 2 centuries. You'll be required to demonstrate competence in military leadership, diplomatic negotiation, and what they call wisdom of governance." Marcus was familiar with the trial of 3 spheres from his studies of imperial history, though he had never imagined it might apply to him personally. The test was designed to evaluate potential rulers during times of succession disputes or political instability. It required the candidate to successfully resolve 3 real crises facing the Empire, demonstrating their ability to handle the diverse challenges of galactic leadership. "And if I fail?" Lyrelai's expression darkened. "The Council would have grounds to demand the dissolution of our marriage and your exile from imperial space. Father could overrule them, but it would create a constitutional crisis that might tear the Empire apart." The weight of the situation settled on Marcus's shoulders. This wasn't just about his personal future, or even his marriage to Lyrelai. The stability of the galaxy's most powerful empire could hang in the balance of his success or failure in the coming trials. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. Lyrelai activated the room's holographic display, and the familiar figure of Emperor Valdris appeared, his expression grave but not entirely without hope. "Marcus," the Emperor began without preamble, "I assume Lyrelai has informed you of the Council's decision. I want you to know that I have complete confidence in your abilities, but the law is clear. The trial must be allowed to proceed." "I understand, Your Majesty. What are the specific challenges the Council has selected?" "The first trial concerns the situation in the Terminus sector," Emperor Valdris explained. "The Korthak Consortium has been conducting raids on Imperial shipping lanes, and our standard diplomatic approaches have failed. The military wants to launch a full assault, but that could destabilize the entire region and potentially drag us into conflict with the Stellar Alliance. You'll need to find a solution that protects Imperial interests without triggering a larger war." Marcus nodded grimly. The Korthak were a warrior species known for their aggressive expansion and disregard for galactic law. They respected strength but viewed diplomacy as weakness, making them particularly challenging opponents for peaceful resolution. "The second trial involves the refugee crisis on Sanctuary 7, the Emperor continued. 3 different species have been displaced by the collapse of the Helix Nebula Mining Consortium, and they're all trying to establish colonies on the same world. Cultural and biological incompatibilities are creating conflicts that threaten to escalate into violence. The planetary government has requested imperial intervention, but any solution must address the needs of all 3 species while respecting their sovereignty." This challenge would test Marcus's diplomatic skills and understanding of interspecies relations. Finding a solution that satisfied 3 different alien cultures with potentially conflicting needs would require creativity and deep knowledge of galactic law. "And the third trial?" Emperor Valdris paused, his expression becoming even more serious. "The third trial is perhaps the most complex. Intelligence reports suggest that House Morvac has been secretly negotiating with separatist movements in the Outer Rim territories. If proven true, it would constitute treason at the highest levels. However, House Morvac has been loyal to the Empire for over 1,000 years, and Lord Morvac is my personal friend. You must investigate these allegations and, if necessary, determine appropriate consequences while preserving Imperial unity." Marcus felt the full weight of the challenges ahead. Each trial would test different aspects of leadership, but all 3 shared a common thread: the need to balance competing interests while preserving the stability of the Empire. One mistake could have consequences that rippled across hundreds of worlds. "How long do I have?" "The Council has granted you 1 standard galactic month to complete all 3 trials," Emperor Valdris replied. "You may choose your own advisors and support staff, but the final decisions and their consequences will be yours alone to bear." As the communication ended, Marcus turned to find Lyrelai watching him with a mixture of concern and determination. He knew that she would support him however she could, but the trials were designed to test his individual capabilities. Success or failure would ultimately rest on his own shoulders. "Where do we start?" she asked. "With the Korthak situation," Marcus replied after a moment of consideration. "Military challenges often have the most immediate consequences, and any delay could result in more attacks on Imperial shipping." The next morning found Marcus aboard the Imperial cruiser Starfire, racing toward the Terminus sector with a small team of advisors he had carefully selected. Admiral Harrison had volunteered to serve as his military consultant, bringing decades of combat experience and knowledge of human military doctrine. Ambassador Kethril, a Zephyrian diplomat with extensive experience in the Outer Rim territories, would provide cultural and political expertise. Finally, Dr. Sarah Kim, a human xenobiologist who had spent years studying Korthak society, would help him understand the psychological and social factors driving their aggressive behavior. The journey to the Terminus sector took 3 days, during which Marcus immersed himself in intelligence reports, tactical analyses, and cultural studies. The Korthak Consortium controlled a cluster of resource-rich systems on the edge of Imperial space, their society built around concepts of honor through conquest and strength through combat. They had been conducting increasingly bold raids on Imperial merchant vessels, capturing cargo and taking prisoners who were reportedly being sold as slaves in underground markets. Previous diplomatic missions had failed because they approached the Korthak using standard galactic protocols that emphasized mutual benefit and peaceful coexistence. Dr. Kim's research suggested that the Korthak interpreted such approaches as signs of weakness, confirming their belief that the Empire was vulnerable to attack. The key, Dr. Kim explained as they reviewed her findings, is understanding that the Korthak don't see raiding as criminal activity. In their culture, taking resources from weaker civilizations is not only acceptable, but necessary for maintaining social status. They view our merchant ships as legitimate targets because we haven't demonstrated the strength to protect them. So we need to show strength, Admiral Harrison concluded. But the Emperor specifically warned against military action that could escalate into a larger conflict. Marcus studied the tactical displays showing Korthak territory and the surrounding regions. The Stellar Alliance had colonies near several Korthak systems, and any Imperial military action could be interpreted as aggression against Alliance interests. However, allowing the raids to continue would signal weakness to other potential adversaries throughout the galaxy. What if we demonstrated strength without actually attacking Korthak territory? Marcus mused. Show them that we have the capability to destroy them if necessary, but offer them something they value more than the resources they're stealing. Ambassador Kethril leaned forward with interest. What did you have in mind? The Korthak value honor and combat prowess above material wealth, Marcus explained, his plan taking shape as he spoke. What if we challenge them to formal combat trials? Ancient Korthak law includes provisions for settling disputes through champions. If we can defeat their best warriors in single combat, they'll be honor-bound to respect our strength and negotiate seriously. Dr. Kim nodded slowly. That could work, but it would require finding champions capable of defeating Korthak warriors. They're genetically enhanced for combat, and their fighting techniques have been refined over millennia. Then we use human champions, Marcus said simply. Humans have one advantage that most species lack. We're unpredictable. Our fighting styles don't follow established patterns, and our willingness to take risks often surprises opponents who expect more cautious approaches. Admiral Harrison smiled grimly. I know just the people for this job. The 42nd Special Operations Unit has been training in multi-species combat techniques. They've studied Korthak fighting methods extensively. The plan that emerged over the next day was risky but elegant in its simplicity. Marcus would request a formal audience with Thane Gorvek, the leader of the Korthak Consortium, using ancient diplomatic protocols that predated modern galactic law. He would challenge the legitimacy of the raids through trial by combat, offering 3 human champions against 3 Korthak warriors. Victory would require the Korthak to end their raiding and negotiate a proper trade agreement. Defeat would grant them the right to continue their activities without Imperial interference. The meeting was arranged on Nexus Station, a neutral trading post on the border between Imperial and Korthak space. The station's central arena had been used for such formal combat trials in the past, equipped with energy shields that could contain even the most destructive weapons while allowing spectators to watch safely. Thane Gorvek arrived with great ceremony, accompanied by his 3 greatest warriors and a retinue of advisors. The Korthak leader was an impressive figure even by the standards of his warlike species, standing nearly 3 meters tall with the characteristic bony ridges and metallic skin patches that indicated high rank in their society. His presence radiated authority and barely contained violence. Marcus entered the arena wearing ceremonial armor that combined human and Zephyrian design elements, a symbol of the unity he represented. Behind him walked his 3 chosen champions, Commander Sarah Reeves, a veteran of dozens of combat operations who specialized in adaptive fighting techniques, Lieutenant Marcus Okafor, whose expertise lay in technical combat and weapons improvisation, and Sergeant Elena Vasquez, whose psychological warfare training made her particularly effective against opponents who relied on intimidation. The formal challenge was issued according to ancient protocols, with each side stating their position and the stakes of the combat. Thane Gorvek accepted with obvious satisfaction, clearly believing that human warriors would prove easy prey for his champions. The first bout matched Commander Reeves against Korthak warrior Vex Thanor, a scarred veteran whose reputation for brutality was known throughout the sector. The arena floor was configured for zero-gravity combat, removing the advantage of superior physical strength and emphasizing skill and tactical thinking. Vex Thanor entered the combat zone with typical Korthak aggression, wielding dual energy blades and relying on overwhelming force to defeat his opponent quickly. Commander Reeves took a different approach, using her jetpack for rapid directional changes that kept her opponent off balance while striking at unexpected angles. The battle was intense, but brief. Vex Thanor's conventional attack patterns, honed through years of fighting other Korthak warriors, proved inadequate against Commander Reeves' unpredictable style. She defeated him by feinting a direct assault, then using her jetpack to reverse direction at the last second, striking his exposed flank with a precisely placed stun blast. The second bout featured Lieutenant Okafor against Korth Venger, the consortium's chief weapons master. This combat took place in a maze-like environment filled with obstacles and improvised weapons. Korth Venger relied on his extensive knowledge of Korthak weaponry and fighting techniques, while Lieutenant Okafor demonstrated human adaptability by constructing improvised weapons from arena debris and environmental hazards. The turning point came when Lieutenant Okafor deliberately triggered an environmental hazard that Korth Venger had assumed was inactive, using the resulting energy discharge to disable his opponent's armor systems. The victory demonstrated human technical knowledge and creative problem-solving in ways that impressed even the Korthak observers. The final bout was perhaps the most challenging. Sergeant Vasquez faced Gorthek, the Thane's personal champion and the most feared warrior in the consortium. The combat environment was configured for atmospheric conditions similar to the Korthak homeworld, giving Gorthek every possible advantage. Sergeant Vasquez recognized that she could not win through direct combat against such a formidable opponent. Instead, she employed psychological tactics, using her knowledge of Korthak culture to goad Gorthek into making increasingly reckless attacks. By questioning his honor and suggesting that he was afraid to face a human warrior, she manipulated him into abandoning his disciplined fighting style in favor of rage-fueled assault. The strategy worked perfectly. Gorthek's emotional response led him to make tactical errors that Sergeant Vasquez exploited with precise timing. She defeated him by turning his own momentum against him, using a combat technique that redirected his charge into a stunning impact with the arena wall. The victory of all three human champions sent shockwaves through the assembled Korthak delegation. According to their own laws and customs, the humans had proven their strength and earned the right to demand cessation of the raids. More importantly, they had demonstrated that humanity possessed fighting capabilities that exceeded Korthak expectations. Thane Gorvek, bound by honor and ancient law, formally acknowledged the imperial victory and agreed to negotiate an end to the raiding activities. However, Marcus recognized that simply stopping the raids would not address the underlying causes of the conflict. The Korthak needed resources and opportunities for their warriors to prove themselves, and without alternatives, they would eventually return to raiding. The solution Marcus proposed was innovative and mutually beneficial. Instead of simply ending the raids, he suggested that the Korthak Consortium be offered exclusive contracts to provide security services for Imperial merchant vessels traveling through dangerous regions of space. This would give Korthak warriors opportunities for honorable combat while protecting Imperial interests and providing legitimate income for the consortium. The arrangement also included provisions for formal combat sports between human and Korthak warriors, creating an outlet for their competitive instincts that could build respect between the two cultures rather than fostering enmity. Finally, Marcus negotiated limited trading rights that would allow the Korthak to access imperial markets in exchange for their unique metallurgical expertise and exotic materials from their territory. The negotiations took another week, but the final agreement exceeded everyone's expectations. Not only did the raiding stop, but the Korthak Consortium became a valuable ally, their warrior skills now serving imperial interests rather than threatening them. The success demonstrated Marcus's ability to think creatively about conflict resolution and find solutions that addressed root causes rather than just symptoms. As the Starfire returned to Zephyrian space, Marcus reflected on the lessons learned from the first trial. The key had been understanding that different species required different approaches, and that sometimes the path to peace led through demonstrations of strength rather than pure diplomacy. However, he knew that the next two trials would present entirely different challenges. The refugee crisis on Sanctuary 7 would test his diplomatic skills and cultural sensitivity, while the investigation of House Morvac would require navigating the treacherous waters of imperial politics and personal relationships. Admiral Harrison joined him on the observation deck as they approached the imperial border. "One down, 2 to go," she observed with a slight smile. "How are you feeling about the challenges ahead?" "Cautiously optimistic," Marcus replied. "Each trial builds on the previous one, and I'm learning that success often comes from finding unconventional approaches to complex problems." "That's very human of you," Admiral Harrison noted. "Our species has always been good at finding unexpected solutions to impossible situations. Let's hope that's enough for what's coming next." As the familiar stars of the Zephyrian Empire came into view, Marcus prepared himself for the second trial. The refugee crisis on Sanctuary 7 would require all of his diplomatic skills and cultural knowledge, but he was beginning to understand that the key to success lay not in following established protocols, but in finding innovative approaches that addressed the unique needs of each situation. The galaxy was watching, and so far humanity's representative was proving worthy of the trust placed in him. But the greatest challenges still lay ahead. The refugee camp on Sanctuary 7 stretched beyond the horizon, a sprawling collection of temporary shelters that housed nearly 2 million displaced beings from 3 different species. From the observation deck of the Imperial transport, Marcus could see the careful segregation that had become necessary to prevent violent conflicts. The crystalline structures preferred by the silicon-based Nexari, the underground burrows excavated by the subterranean Morvellians, and the elevated platforms constructed by the avian Skyborn. Each species had fled the economic collapse of the Helix Nebula Mining Consortium, but their reasons for choosing Sanctuary 7 as their destination varied dramatically. The planet's unique ecosystem could theoretically support all 3 species, but their biological and cultural requirements often conflicted in ways that threatened to tear apart the fragile peace. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead xenobiologist assigned to the refugee situation, met Marcus at the landing pad. Her expression was haggard from months of dealing with increasingly tense negotiations between the 3 species, and her initial briefing painted a picture of mounting crisis. "The immediate problem is resource allocation," she explained as they traveled toward the main administrative complex. "The Nexari require specific mineral deposits for their reproductive cycles. The Morvellians need access to underground water sources for their larvae, and the Skyborn need elevated nesting sites with particular wind patterns. All 3 requirements overlap in the same geographical areas." Marcus studied the detailed environmental surveys as they walked. The planet was rich in resources, but the specific locations where all 3 species could thrive were limited. Previous attempts at negotiation had failed because each species viewed compromise as a threat to their survival. "What about artificial habitat creation?" Marcus asked. "Could we modify the environment to meet everyone's needs?" "We've tried that approach," Dr. Rodriguez replied with frustration. The Nexari reject artificial mineral formations because they lack the proper molecular resonance patterns. The Morvellians won't accept processed water because it doesn't contain the specific microorganisms their larvae require. And the Skyborn insist that artificial wind patterns don't provide the navigation cues they need for successful reproduction. The situation was further complicated by the legal status of the refugees. Each species claimed territorial rights based on different interpretations of galactic law. The Nexari argued that their advanced technology gave them priority access to mineral resources. The Morvellians claimed historical precedent, stating that their ancestors had originally discovered the planet centuries ago. The Skyborn invoked environmental protection laws, arguing that they were the only species qualified to serve as planetary custodians due to their aerial perspective. The first formal meeting with representatives from all three species took place in a specially designed chamber that accommodated their different environmental needs. The Nexari delegation consisted of three crystalline beings whose bodies reflected light in complex patterns that served as both communication and emotional expression. The Morvellian representatives were smaller, mole-like creatures with enhanced sensory organs that allowed them to navigate underground environments. The Skyborn delegation featured graceful, winged beings whose feathers changed color to indicate their emotional states. Marcus began the session with a careful acknowledgement of each species' unique situation and legitimate needs. However, he quickly realized that traditional diplomatic approaches would not work in this context. Each species viewed the others as competitors for survival rather than potential partners in building a new society. "I propose we step back from discussions of territory and resources," Marcus announced after listening to hours of increasingly heated arguments. "Instead, let's focus on what each species can offer the others. What unique capabilities does each group possess that could benefit the entire community?" The suggestion was met with skeptical silence from all three delegations. However, Dr. Rodriguez had prepared detailed profiles of each species' capabilities, and Marcus began to outline possibilities that none of them had previously considered. The Nexari possess advanced crystal-growing technology that could create specialized habitats for other species. The Morvellians have unparalleled geological expertise that could identify new resource deposits. The Skyborn have aerial reconnaissance abilities that could map optimal settlement patterns for the entire planet. Slowly, the discussion began to shift from competition to collaboration. Marcus introduced the concept of specialized economic zones, where each species could excel in their particular strengths while contributing to the overall prosperity of the planet. The breakthrough came when he suggested a three-tier development model that would take advantage of Sanctuary 7's unique geography. The planet featured extensive highland regions, perfect for Skyborn settlements, a network of underground caverns ideal for Morvellian communities, and surface areas rich in the specific minerals the Nexari required. Rather than competing for the same territories, each species would develop their optimal environments while creating interconnected trade networks that benefited everyone. The Nexari would provide advanced technology for infrastructure development. The Morvellians would handle underground resource extraction and geological surveying. The Skyborn would manage atmospheric monitoring and planetary communication networks. The negotiation process took 2 weeks, during which Marcus had to navigate complex cultural misunderstandings and competing interpretations of galactic law. The key breakthrough came when he arranged for representatives from each species to visit the other's temporary settlements, allowing them to see firsthand how different their actual needs were. The final agreement established the Sanctuary 7 Cooperative Commonwealth, a unique governmental structure that gave each species autonomous control over their preferred territories while creating joint councils for planetary management. Trade agreements ensured that each group's economic needs would be met through cooperation rather than competition. Most importantly, The settlement established precedents for refugee rights and interspecies cooperation that could be applied to similar situations throughout the galaxy. Marcus's solution had transformed a potential disaster into a model for peaceful coexistence between radically different alien cultures. The success on Sanctuary 7 earned Marcus significant recognition throughout the Empire, but it also brought him to the attention of the final and most dangerous trial. The investigation of House Morvac required him to enter the treacherous world of imperial politics, where a single misstep could have consequences reaching to the very heart of the Empire. House Morvac controlled 12 star systems and commanded one of the largest private fleets in imperial space. Lord Commander Zethys Morvac was Emperor Valdris's childhood friend and had served as a trusted advisor for over 3 decades. The allegations of treason against such a prominent figure created political ramifications that extended far beyond normal judicial proceedings. Marcus's investigation team included Admiral Harrison for military expertise, Judge Advocate Theron Cole for legal matters, and Intelligence Director Mavek Toll, whose network of agents had originally uncovered the suspicious communications between House Morvac and separatist movements. The evidence was circumstantial but troubling. Encrypted communications had been intercepted between Morvac agents and leaders of the Independence Coalition, a group of Outer Rim worlds seeking to break away from imperial rule. Financial records showed large payments from House Morvac accounts to companies known to supply weapons to separatist forces. Most damning of all, surveillance reports indicated secret meetings between Lord Morvac and coalition representatives on neutral worlds. However, Marcus quickly discovered that the investigation was complicated by layers of political intrigue that went far beyond simple treason. Several other noble houses had financial interests in Outer Rim mining operations that would be threatened by separatist independence. The Imperial Treasury had been pressuring frontier worlds with increased taxation that created genuine grievances among colonial populations. Even the military had divided loyalties, with some officers sympathizing with colonial demands for greater autonomy. The first phase of the investigation required Marcus to travel to House Morvac's primary world of Kronos Prime. The planet was a testament to centuries of wealth and power, with massive cities that showcased the finest examples of Zephyrian architecture and technology. Lord Morvac received Marcus with apparent openness, offering complete cooperation with the investigation while maintaining his innocence of any treasonous activities. "I won't deny that I've had communications with coalition leaders," Lord Morvac admitted during their first formal interview. "But those communications were aimed at preventing violence, not encouraging it. I believe that some colonial grievances are legitimate, and I've been trying to find peaceful solutions that preserve imperial unity." Marcus found himself impressed by Lord Morvac's apparent sincerity and obvious love for the empire he was accused of betraying. The man was clearly a patriot who had devoted his life to imperial service, making the allegations of treason seem increasingly unlikely. However, Intelligence Director Toll presented additional evidence that painted a more complex picture. Financial analysis showed that House Morvac's mining operations in the Outer Rim would actually benefit from increased independence, as colonial worlds would have greater freedom to negotiate favorable extraction agreements. Some of the payments to weapons suppliers could be interpreted as insurance policies, ensuring that House Morvac would maintain influence regardless of how the colonial situation resolved. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Marcus uncovered evidence of a much larger conspiracy. The allegations against House Morvac were being orchestrated by a coalition of rival noble houses who sought to eliminate a powerful competitor while simultaneously discrediting Emperor Valdris's judgment in trusting his old friend. The real conspiracy involved House Viridian, the same noble family that had demanded the trial of 3 spheres. Lord Thaxian had been secretly funding separatist movements not to support independence, but to create chaos that would justify military intervention and the installation of a more authoritarian imperial government. The evidence was hidden in layers of financial transactions and coded communications that required weeks to unravel. Marcus's human background proved crucial in this phase of the investigation, as his analytical approaches differed from traditional Zephyrian methods and allowed him to identify patterns that others had missed. The revelation created an explosive political crisis. House Viridian had significant influence within the Council of Houses, and accusations of treason against them required extraordinary proof. Marcus knew that he would have only one opportunity to present his findings, and the evidence needed to be absolutely irrefutable. Working with Judge Advocate Cole, Marcus prepared a comprehensive presentation that traced the conspiracy through financial records, communication intercepts, and testimony from witnesses who had been approached by Viridian agents. The case was circumstantial but compelling, showing a pattern of behavior consistent with deliberate destabilization of imperial authority. The formal hearing took place before the full Council of Houses, with representatives from every major noble family in attendance. The chamber was tense with anticipation as Marcus presented his findings, knowing that the future of the empire might depend on his ability to convince the assembled nobles of the truth. Lord Thaxion's defense was skillfully prepared, presenting alternative explanations for each piece of evidence while questioning Marcus's qualifications to investigate such sensitive matters. The noblemen argued that a human could not possibly understand the complex loyalties and relationships that governed Zephyrian noble society. The turning point came when Marcus presented recorded communications between Lord Thaxion and separatist leaders that had been hidden using encryption techniques known only to House Viridian. The recordings clearly showed Thaxion encouraging violence and promising weapons shipments, while simultaneously reporting to imperial authorities about separatist activities he had secretly encouraged. The evidence was devastating, but Marcus's presentation went beyond simply proving Lord Thaxion's guilt. He demonstrated how the conspiracy was part of a larger pattern of noble houses using colonial unrest to increase their own power at the expense of imperial stability. Most importantly, Marcus's investigation had uncovered the real solution to the colonial crisis. Rather than military suppression or aristocratic manipulation, the Outer Rim worlds needed genuine representation in imperial government and economic policies that addressed their legitimate grievances. The Council's judgment was swift and decisive. Lord Thaxion was stripped of his titles and sentenced to exile, while House Viridian was placed under imperial oversight. However, Marcus's recommendations for colonial reform were accepted as part of the final judgment, creating new policies that would address the root causes of separatist sentiment. The success of all three trials created a sensation throughout the empire. Marcus had demonstrated military leadership by resolving the Korthak raids, diplomatic skill by solving the refugee crisis, and wisdom of governance by uncovering and addressing the noble conspiracy. Emperor Valdris convened a special session of the imperial court to announce the results of the trials. The great throne chamber was packed with representatives from across the galaxy, all eager to witness the conclusion of this unprecedented test of human worthiness. "Marcus Chen of Earth," the emperor proclaimed, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "you have successfully completed the trial of three spheres, demonstrating capabilities that exceed the requirements for imperial service. The Council of Houses acknowledges your fitness to serve as Prince Consort and heir to the throne." The announcement was met with enthusiastic approval from most of the assembled nobles, though Marcus noticed some faces that showed concern rather than celebration. His success had proven human capability, but it had also demonstrated that humanity now possessed significant influence within the galaxy's most powerful empire. Lord Commander Morvac, cleared of all charges and restored to his position, approached Marcus after the formal ceremony. "Thank you for believing in truth over convenience," he said quietly. You could have chosen the easy path and simply confirmed the accusations against me. Justice required the complete truth, Marcus replied. The Empire's strength comes from the integrity of its institutions, not from political convenience. Emperor Valdris nodded approvingly. Spoken like a true heir to the throne. As the celebration continued into the evening, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. Less than a year ago, he had been a simple diplomat serving humanity's interests in galactic affairs. Now he stood as Prince Consort of the Zephyrian Empire, with responsibilities that extended across hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. Lirelei joined him on the observation balcony where he had retreated from the crowds. The twin suns were setting over the capital city, painting the crystal spires in shades of gold and crimson that seemed to celebrate the day's achievements. "Are you ready for what comes next?" she asked, echoing her question from months ago, but with an entirely different context. Marcus considered the question seriously. The trials were over, but his real work was just beginning. As Prince Consort, he would help shape policies that affected the entire galaxy. His success had proven that humans could be trusted with galactic responsibility, but it had also created expectations that would be difficult to meet. "I'm ready to try," he said finally. "The trials taught me that success often comes from finding new approaches to old problems. Maybe that's what humanity can offer the galaxy, a fresh perspective on challenges that have seemed unsolvable. The colonial reform proposals you presented have already generated significant interest," Lirelei noted. "Several other regions are requesting similar evaluations of their grievances." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. The colonial crisis had revealed fundamental flaws in how the Empire managed its frontier territories. Traditional approaches based on absolute imperial authority were creating more problems than they solved. His recommendations for increased local representation and economic autonomy offered a path toward sustainable stability. "Change is never easy," Marcus observed, "especially for an empire that has been successful for thousands of years. But the galaxy is evolving, and we need to evolve with it or risk being left behind." Over the following months, Marcus threw himself into his new responsibilities with the same determination he had shown during the trials. Working closely with Emperor Valdris and the Imperial Council, he helped develop comprehensive reforms that addressed many of the systemic issues that had created recent crises. The Korthak Integration Protocol became a model for how warrior species could be incorporated into imperial society as productive partners rather than conquered enemies. The Sanctuary 7 Cooperative Commonwealth inspired similar solutions for refugee populations throughout the galaxy. Most significantly, the Colonial Representation Act created new pathways for frontier worlds to participate in imperial governance while maintaining their local autonomy. Each success demonstrated humanity's growing influence within galactic civilization, but it also generated opposition from those who preferred traditional approaches to imperial management. Marcus learned to navigate the complex political landscape of the Empire, building coalitions of support while carefully managing opposition from conservative factions. The most significant challenge came during the Imperial Assembly's annual session, when representatives from across the Empire gathered to review and approve major policy initiatives. Marcus's colonial reform proposals faced strong opposition from noble houses that profited from the existing system of frontier exploitation. The debate was intense and sometimes personal, with some speakers questioning whether a human could truly understand the complexities of managing a galactic empire. Marcus responded not with defensive arguments, but with concrete examples of how his proposals had already succeeded in real-world applications. "The critics are right that I don't have centuries of experience in imperial governance," Marcus acknowledged during his address to the Assembly. "But perhaps that's exactly why my perspective has value. Sometimes fresh eyes can see solutions that experience has overlooked." The final vote was closer than Marcus had hoped, but his proposals passed with sufficient support to begin implementation. The victory was particularly sweet because it came through democratic process rather than imperial decree, proving that his ideas could win acceptance based on their merits rather than his royal status. As the first year of his marriage to Lyra drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that first nervous meeting with Emperor Valdris. The scared diplomat who had worried about making a good impression had evolved into a confident leader who helped shape galactic policy. Admiral Harrison visited the palace during one of her regular reports to the imperial court, and she expressed amazement at Marcus's transformation. "You've become everything I hoped you would when I first recommended you for diplomatic service," she said with obvious pride. "I had excellent teachers," Marcus replied. "And more importantly, I had opportunities to prove that humans can be trusted with responsibility." "What's next for you?" Admiral Harrison asked. "Emperor Valdris isn't getting any younger, and there's already speculation about succession planning." Marcus had been thinking about that question frequently. Lyra was the designated heir to the throne, which meant that he would eventually become emperor consort of the galaxy's most powerful empire. The prospect was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. "One challenge at a time," Marcus said diplomatically. "Right now, I'm focused on making sure the reforms we've implemented actually work in practice. Real change takes time to establish roots." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the frontier territories. A new crisis had emerged in the Vega sector, where first contact with a previously unknown species had gone badly wrong. The aliens had been interpreted as hostile based on their initial communications, and military commanders were requesting permission to launch preemptive strikes. Marcus immediately volunteered to investigate the situation personally, recognizing that miscommunications during first contact could have catastrophic consequences for both species involved. His experience with diverse alien cultures and his reputation for finding peaceful solutions made him the logical choice to lead the diplomatic mission. Emperor Valdris approved the mission with obvious confidence in Marcus's abilities. "6 months ago, I questioned whether a human could understand the complexities of galactic leadership," the Emperor admitted. "Today, I can't imagine anyone better qualified to handle this situation." As Marcus prepared for yet another challenge, he realized that his journey from nervous diplomat to imperial leader had taught him valuable lessons about both humanity and the galaxy they now called home. Humans brought unique perspectives to galactic civilization: creativity, adaptability, and a willingness to challenge conventional wisdom when circumstances demanded new approaches. The trials had proven that Marcus was worthy of his royal position, but more importantly, they had demonstrated that humanity deserved its place among the stars. As the Empire's newest prince consort prepared for his next mission, the galaxy watched with interest to see what other innovations this remarkable human would bring to the ancient challenges of interstellar governance. The future stretched ahead full of possibilities, and for the first time since arriving at the Zephyrian court, Marcus felt completely confident in his ability to meet whatever challenges awaited. The galaxy was vast and complex, but it was also full of opportunities for those bold enough to pursue them. His transformation from uncertain suitor to imperial leader had proven that with courage, intelligence, and determination, even the most unlikely individuals could rise to meet the greatest challenges. The human species had found its champion among the stars, and that champion was ready to help build a better future for all the galaxy's children. As the imperial transport carried Marcus toward his next mission, Lyra stood beside him, her pride and love evident in every gesture. Together, they represented a new generation of galactic leadership, one that valued cooperation over conquest and innovation over tradition. The monarch's question had been answered definitively. Marcus Chen was not just Lyrale's husband. He was a prince consort worthy of the title, a leader capable of guiding the galaxy toward a brighter future, and living proof that humanity's greatest adventures among the stars were only just beginning.